give some little bit background. So here I am, Joel Weintraub, biology department, 1968 to 2001. I took early retirement, and with my tool set and my interest in genealogy, I went over to the National Archives in Laguna Niguel and volunteered as a docent, helping people do their genealogy for 9 years. And I did that until they moved to Riverside. They were in the Zuganot building, and basically they got kicked out. Rents were too high, and the internet was causing people not to go anymore to look at the records. They could do that online. And when I went in 2001, the 1930 census was going to become public in 2002. And the way that happened was you had to go down there on April 1st. They unlocked a bunch of microfilm. There was a crowd of people waiting to get in. And then they had to figure out where they were on that film, either by maybe some very poor quality maps or this little pamphlet here, which shows where all things are in terms of the films. And actually, I tracked down who these people are on the cover of this. And it's an entomology conference. I thought that was cute, that these are people on that. So I said to them, I proposed in 2001 that an indexing project involving street blocks to enumeration districts be started. I would start it for the upcoming 1930 census release. And people said to me I wouldn't be able to do that, and I was crazy to try. They were right about one of those two things. And so since that time, and here we are 20 years later, and I'm looking at the third opening of the US Census, and I and my volunteers and Steve Morse had to have a hand in helping people on every one of those censuses. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a talk that I give. I never give the same talk twice. It's always revised to genealogy organizations and historical organizations as well. So it's not watered down for you people. I'm assuming that you're at the level of, beginning or intermediate genealogists, and I will try my best to make everything understandable. And what I'm going to do is first I'm going to say, why are we here? Why are we here? To see an April 1st, well, that's actually wrong. I'm sorry, that's actually wrong. Let's try that again. Why are we here to see on March 31st, 2022, 1 second after 9 p.m., 1 second after midnight in Washington, D.C., the results of an event that happened in April of 1950. And I'm going to introduce you to some terminology. I teach from examples. And so I happen to have here a bunch of photographs that were taken in March of 1950, and they were given to newspapers. So you can buy these. These are from morgues, from newspapers. And we'll assume that this is a real enumerator, but let's do some definitions. So here we have a part-time government employee who's a census taker, an enumerator, and her responsibility is to go to houses in the US and its territories. She hesitates and looks down at her portfolio, and there's a map there of her responsibility. She has 2 weeks in urban areas. She has 1 month in rural areas, and that may be an aerial photograph there. And her responsibility is called an enumeration district, or an ED. And that's an important concept because we'll be talking about EDs, especially in the latter part of the talk. Her two-part ED, which starts in 1930, the two-part format, was unique within a state. And I may quiz you on that. I may do some quizzing at the end. She shows her identification, and she can ask to be let in. That's not a requirement. The homeowner can refuse to allow her to come in. She may have to do her enumeration standing up and writing up. Keep that in mind. So the person's handwriting may change dramatically from one person to the next. She goes in, and in a 15 to 20-minute period, she asks questions as written on a large sheet, and I'll show you these later, of the 1950 population schedule. She turns that sheet over, and on the back of the sheet is the housing schedule. And she's going to get paid for every line she filled in. She's not going to get an hourly rate, an hourly wage. So my goals here for you are to give an overview of the 1950 U.S. Census and what you can do now to prepare for it. You don't have too many days left before it opens up. To mainly discuss the National Archives and the Morse One-Step website resources, to give you a useful 1950 Census handout, which you should have gotten a link to, and that's important. I then introduce you to my YouTube channel, JDW Talks. As I indicated, I do talk from examples. In fact, I have a bunch of examples to show you on the right. And when the pandemic hit, I knew that was not going to be possible. It's really too bad, because I could pass around a original 1950 census form. I don't think people want to handle what somebody just handled in front of you. And so what I did was I established my own channel on YouTube. I didn't think I'd have more than 20 talks there. This was done about a year and a half ago. I have 30 YouTube talks just on the 1950 census and get a lot of traffic for them. So this handout that you have a link for is filled with links. This is a handout that's filled with links. And what I want you to do is I want you to establish your own resource folder, because I'm going to suggest things to put in there. And the first thing I want you to put in there is a copy of the handout. It has things that I will be talking about during this talk. I want you to create a file of the people that you would like to look for on the 1950 census. Were they alive in April of 1950? And where they were. I want you to figure out their address. And I'll suggest some ways of finding that later. There will be a preliminary name index in April 1st, but most people, we're not sure of how robust it is. We'll talk about that. That will be the first time that the National Archive will have a name index. So let's go through some U.S. Census Basics for those of you who don't know much about it. You should know about it because California lost a House of Representatives seat because of the 2020 census. It's mandated by the U.S. Constitution. It's done every 10 years since 1790. The questions are always interesting and sometimes reflect the problems of the decade. There is a 72-year privacy period that has nothing to do with life expectancy. I did a research project in 2008 and published the origin of that 72-year rule. It was an agreement between the Archivist of the United States and the Bureau of the Census Director. And so every 72 years, since 1940, actually, a U.S. Census has come to become public. And so that's where April 1st, 2022 comes in. And I always bring Albert with me. He's a smart guy. Here he is in New Jersey, in Princeton. Hey, Al, how many days to go? Well, you only got 9 days left before this census comes online. And if you look closely, if you look really closely, you'll see that he's being enumerated by Emma Bovee Cromwell. This is a second enumeration. Look at all the stuff that she has to carry around with her. Can you imagine her standing up and doing this interview? And look what she's writing with. Come back to that. The U.S. uses the census to reapportion the House of Representatives and to distribute funds to the states. And a lot of other people also use the census and I interact with many of them. Many of them are graduate students who want to access our databases. But the number one group are genealogists, family historians, et cetera, and sociologists use the census quite a bit. But you have to be careful. You don't know who gave the family's information. You did in 1940. The 1940 census has an X next to the name of the person who gave the information. That's the only one. It could be number one, who's that great uncle of yours who had a sense of humor that now you got to figure out, what did he answer that for? And number three doesn't look that honest either. You don't know if the person or the census taker was honest and truthful. You don't know if the census taker asked questions as written, heard answers accurately, or wrote them down as given, including names. So even if there's a perfect name index, you still may not be able to find your people. Keep that in mind. So you may end up with just a piece of junk. The 1950 census covered the US and its territories. Alaska and Hawaii were not states yet. We have American Samoa, Guam, Panama Canal, etc. I want to point out that these US territories are not foreign countries. They are not overseas, or they're not abroad. Because people have found this information. This is on the Census Bureau website, the 1950 census. Harry Truman was our president. And it says that Americans abroad were enumerated for the first time in 1950. Provisions were made to count members of the armed forces. Most of them were in occupied Japan and Germany. Crews of vessels and employees of the US government, mostly diplomatic corps, in foreign countries, along with members of their families. That's not a small number of people. In fact, there are more people overseas than in 3 states in 1950. However, the 1950 census coverage is not the same as the April 2022 coverage that we will actually see. And it turns out that we will not see most of those people abroad. And I have a YouTube video on this. You have a link to it in your handout. In addition to that, I have to modify it because one of the national archivists, who is very well known, Claire Kluskens, she is a media expert and a interface with genealogists. She specializes in immigration, census, and military, wrote a blog. She has a major blog on census material, 1950, about Americans overseas. And she indicates that, yes, census schedules do exist for Canton, Johnstown, Midway, and Wake Islands that include U.S. military personnel and civilian contractors. And they will be part of the rollout on April 1st, 2022. But most of people will not be part. No other records of Americans overseas are part of the 1950 census. The early speakers online about the 1950 census tended to imply that people would see occupied German U.S. bases, et cetera. That does not appear to be true. Now, one of the things I'm interested in is enumerators. I have a lot of material on enumerators, manuals, forms, et cetera. And so I want to figure out if you guys qualify, if Curtis qualifies to be a 1950 enumerator. See what it takes. So I look at my collection, and there is a message to job applicants. You have to be a U.S. citizen with a high school education or equivalent. You have to be able to write neatly and legibly. I don't think if they did that when you were standing up. Be able to talk easily with people. You had to have good eyesight, be in good physical condition. A lot of enumerators quit, especially in large cities where they had to go climb up and down stairs. And in all areas, have a good working fountain pen. A good working fountain pen. The federal government is not going to give you your own fountain pen. So, Bob, do you have your own fountain pen? Yes, he does. And real ink too? You got ink? Wow, that's amazing. So he could be an enumerator, but the rest of you, I don't know. You also had to pass a written exam. Preference was given to veterans. And then you were given your own enumerator reference manual. Now, in 1940, the manual looked like this. So what the manual looked like gave all instructions. In 1950, the manual is really slick. It's a really slick manual filled with pictures and instructions. You had to memorize that. I want you to get the manual. You can get the manual. Get a full copy of the manual for your 1950 census resource folder. So if there's any question about what's on the census sheet, the answer will be in the reference manual. There are a couple of places where you can get this manual, and the handout tells you where one of them is. Show you another one later. Well, you know, it's really difficult to get enumerators, actually. It wasn't that easy, although the pay was very good. So I guess I'm going to have to make you all enumerators. You have your own card. You're not on your own. You have a supervisor, about one supervisor for about something like 12 to 15 enumerators. And every day you're going to take this postcard, you've got a bunch of these, and tell your supervisor how many persons you enumerated, et cetera, because he can fire you. He can fire you. You filled in an infant card. Now, infants were an undercounted group. So the Census Bureau felt that if you had to fill out your own card for infants and got money for that, that they would do better. But they never scanned these cards. And so there's just summary information. People always ask about infant cards. They don't exist anymore. So here's an ad, let's make him count in America's future. You were given postcards like this, that if you went to a residence and no one was there, you left this card indicating, I need to make an appointment. And actually newspapers published things that said, if you haven't been enumerated, clip this out and send it to this address, and we will send an enumerator. So there was an attempt to try and enumerate as many people as they could. It wasn't perfect, but there was an attempt. So if you can't find a residence on this census, it may not be because of the enumerator, it may be because the residents did not participate. You were given your own portfolio. Now, it's incredible to me that I was able to find one of these on eBay. Just incredible to see an original one. Picture yourself trying to write in this thing, standing up on there. And the reason it's also incredible, not only because they had to turn these in, but because it was used to mail in the enumerator forms. So that's probably the rarest thing I have to show you. Now, one of the things I bought, the person tried to figure out how much money that they were getting. And so I want to show you this, because I'm sure you're going to be asking about how much money. You got 7 cents a line. You got 7 cents for the sampling lines we'll talk about. You got 7 cents for people who are in your area but lived elsewhere. You got 7 cents for infant cards, and you got 7 cents in the housing schedule. So this person made, for 98 hours of work, $87. $87. Is that good? Is that a good amount of money? Curtis, is that a good amount of money? Yes, it is, actually. In fact, I'll tell you what, since I'm flush with money, I'm going to take you to Knoxbury Farm. I have a menu here from Knoxbury Farm from 1951. 1951. You can buy their chicken dinner for $2. Complete chicken dinner. It will also include the dessert and everything else. How much does that cost today? Well, the last time I looked, when they reopened during the pandemic, was $24.50. So went from $2 to $24.50. Let's see, boysenberry pie, 15 cents a slice. Tea, 10 cents. How much would that cost you today? $5 for the pie slice, $4 for the tea. Yeah, that was a good price. You enumerators have the right to the truth. Doesn't everybody? You have a right not only to an answer, but to a truthful answer. Do not accept any statement that you believe to be false. Probe tactfully for the correct answer. Now, this is a new. If you fail to obtain a corrected answer, enter the answer given and footnote it. There's going to be a section for footnotes here to indicate you believe the answer is incorrect and also what you believe is the correct answer. So we're going to be looking at this, this form a couple of times. Eventually, I'll show you a real one. And you will find that there's a place on it for notes. It can be interesting to see. Unusual entries, irregular situations, belief the respondent answer is wrong, confidential income report left. Person refused to tell you how much they made. You gave them this confidential report. You're supposed to fill it out, mail it back to the Washington, and eventually that information is put on your line. And you'll see a note saying we gave this person this form, but maybe they never followed through. Now, there are two groups that I want you to know about, two enumerating groups, and I'm hearing voices in the background here. We have a gardener coming, and hopefully we're going to intercept him. So there are two enumeration groups I want to tell you about and the usual place of residence. The first one are babies. And this is from the manual. For a person who was born in a hospital or elsewhere outside of the state in which his family was living at the time he was born, enter the state in which his family was living, not the state in which the hospital was located. So people are going to be very upset. They're going to be looking for somebody. They know their birthplace, and they're going to see a different birthplace on the census. And, you know, it's a historical fact. So keep that in mind. The second one I want to tell you is about, and this is my favorite enumeration district map. This is a map of College Park, Maryland, an official map from 1950. Shows you some enumeration districts on the bottom. And there's a hint. There's a hint here. What is College Park, Maryland known for? What is College Park, Bob? What is College Park, Maryland known for?
University of Maryland.
No, yeah, look at that. The hell in a shell. Hell in a shell. So let's talk about college students from the manual. A student who's away from home attending a school at college level in 1950 is considered a resident of the ED in which he lives while attending college and not of the ED in which his home is located. That's different than 1940. Enumerate him on the population schedule at the place where he lives while attending college, even if he is home on vacation at the time of enumeration. So you're going to look for a family, you're going to look for a veteran. He's not there in that family at the residence you expect. They may be away from college because the GI Bill gave World War II servicemen and servicewomen many options and benefits. Those who wish to continue their education in college or vocation school could do so tuition free up to $500, something like $5,000 buying power, while also receiving a cost of living stipend. As a result, almost 49% of college admissions in 1947 were veterans. The GI Bill opened the door of higher education to the working class in a way never done before. So where would I find students to enumerate in College Park, Maryland? I wouldn't go into their classroom. I don't think that would be nice. I don't think they're at their dorms. Well, you know, there's some suggestion here. The Census Bureau got these maps wherever they could. They're mostly public maps, and then they drew on them. They did not create their own maps. So I don't know whether what's on the upper left was there before or after the census taker got these maps. But look at the hint of where these college students might be. You see the hint there? These are all the liquor places in College Park, Maryland. They're all there. And whether they're open or not, all the liquor places. This is an official ED map. Well, who would believe anything that comes out of College Park, Maryland? Now, as enumerators, you have a number of schedules. I want to talk about the housing and population. In 1940, this is a 1940 form. 1940 form that I could pass around. On the front and the back, the form is the same. So the form had an A and a B side. And then in 1940, there was a separate housing schedule. Separate, which again, front and back. But in 1950, so here's a 1950 blank schedule. The front has the population schedule. The back has the housing schedule. The back was never filmed. It was never preserved. We just have summary statistics. However, and sociologists would love this. However, the Census Bureau came up with a set of housing pamphlets for cities of 50,000 or more, which includes a map showing every block numbered in the cities, and then a summary of socioeconomic information. And for California, these cities have pamphlets. They're available free online and the Census Bureau. And I have a full YouTube video on this. And this is what it looks like, the text. So you look at the left, Census Tract B3. There's block 13, 14, 15. It tells you how many people owned or rented. Say the first line has 63 residences, whether they are vacant, whether they are dilapidated. And then we go to whether they have private baths or running water. You can see that the block 13, 3 don't have a private bath. 2 don't have running water. This is in San Francisco. And then we have a number of people per room. I guess that's an index of overpopulation. A racial column occupied by non-white. The average monthly rent in San Francisco went from $43 to maybe $65 here a month. And then the average value of dwellings there, which you can see went up to 20, 30,000. But I look at this in some cities and they're $8,000, $9,000 for a house. So my advice is, if block housing summary information is of interest, get the pamphlets for what you are interested in. Now, the population schedule on the front, we'll look at that. I want you to get a high resolution copy of it. They're available. So when you zoom in, you can read each column. I have a YouTube video on how to do that. You have links to a high resolution copy. When you actually see yourself or your family on these population schedules, you need to see the following. First of all, as an enumerator, I write the number 1 on my first sheet. There's not an A or B. And the second sheet, the population schedule, I write the number 2. And then I leave space for people who weren't there, callback numbers. And I start entering the information from them on sheet number 71. And this has confused people. That's not the 71st page. That's sheet 71. So you can have 3 sheets in an enumeration district: sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 71. So that's not a sheet number. That's just something that's there. They could have put down CB 71. They could have put down X. So just be aware of that. When you look at these population schedules, you'll see some very heavy lines. Those people were asked additional questions. Those are sample questions. And one of those 6 were asked an additional question. So 1 out of 5 people were asked additional questions. You will see 5 versions of where these sample lines are within the ED sheets. The columns will be the same. So they did sampling. They started that in 1940. Now, I'm not going to tell you what the questions are. That's a standard way that people give these talks. The Census Bureau has a lecture series. Claire Kluskins did one on March 2nd, and she went through the entire form. So if you want an overview of the form, I have a link in your handout on that. Okay, that's part one. The second part of this talk is to what to expect on opening day. Define yourselves. It's going to be very interesting. When the 1940 census came online in April of 2012, the National Archive website crashed. There were some people trying to get in. There's going to be a name index. Unbelievable. First time on day one. And so what we have been told is that the National Archive has used optical character recognition, which is now able to read handwriting. They use artificial intelligence and machine learning and have come up with a preliminary name index. Now, they've gotten a little bit more cautious as the weeks have gone by, et cetera. And this is what they did. Give you a flow chart. They've been sitting on the 1950 population schedule films. They got those from the Census Bureau. They're under lock and key. They digitized them. Then they did this OCR AIML just on the name column. On April 1st, 2022, they're going to give you this searchable name index, searchable by name and location. Well, most census name indexes are searchable by name, location, sex, age, other people in the family, blah, blah, blah. This is a cut down name index. And once it's out, they're trying to get the public to proof it, to transcribe it. I don't know. The Census Bureau on March 17th, not March 7th, March 14th, came up with a preview, and they had Claire give a talk. And Claire gave this talk, and this is from her talk. That's very interesting. Now she calls it a first draft. You see, she's being a little more cautious, imperfect. They OCR'd a line number and a name. Surnames are only on names of head of household. So if I'm reading this correctly, this is a line-based name index. It's not a family-based name index. So if I tried to look myself up, Joel Weintraub, I couldn't see that. I'd have to look it up by Joel in Manhattan. I'd have to find my dad's, whose house of head of household, to get to the surname. We're going to find out. Yeah, I have a lot of questions still. We're going to find that out on April 1st. The National Archive has a whole website about information about the 1950 census. Questions asked, so you can see an overview there. The instruction manual, blank census forms, Native Americans, finding aids, and external resources. And if you look in here, you'll find a number of links to utilities that I've worked on. It's incredible how many things that they are linked to that I have a direct hand in. Kind of pleased about that. You should also know that Ancestry, which is a pay genealogy company, and Family Search, which is a Mormon organization, it's free, will do the following. So the 1950 population images will not be available to anybody until April 1st of 2022. At that time, at 1 second after midnight, Ancestry, Family Search, and everybody who has a big ability to get terabytes of data will start to ingest the information. The data is on the cloud at the Amazon servers. So they're going to start to bring in all these information. Family Search will then start putting it online. And I am interested in this because we are helping Family Search Steve Morse and myself, we've allowed them to use part of our database. And in return, they're going to show us exactly how to get to every single image. And as they figure that out, we get to figure it out. And so we'll go directly from our website to the images. Then what's going to happen is that Ancestry has their own OCR AI that they're going to do. And they're going to do every column. They're not just going to do the name column. They're going to do every single column of the census. They're going to give Family Search that information. And then Family Search is going to organize what's called the 1950 U.S. Census Community Project. They did this in 1940 when it came out, when they did it in 2012. When 1940 census came out, they had 160,000 volunteers name index the census. So I don't know why the National Archive, who knew this was coming, would decide to do it themselves. And nobody knows, and these volunteers now don't have to transcribe, they just have to check the columns. So no one knows how long that's going to take. They think it'll be completed in the summer of 2022. They're going to roll it out by states. It'll be a searchable index on every column. So if you want to find out all the professors, if that's on one of the columns, you can search for somebody and by professor, for instance. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. However, nobody's sure what's going to happen in terms of the preliminary name index. And so they're going to locational tools. And this is where I have a specialty. This is where everybody's going to go to our website that we have created. Locational tools are ED maps, ED definitions, and street indexes. The idea is that if you have an address or a location, and that will lead you to an enumeration district number, and that will lead you to a population schedule. You're going to have to go through it, but you'll go to the first page. So why would you choose locational tools when there's going to be a name index? Well, when there isn't an adequate name index, you don't think there will be. Misspelled and mangled census names, garbage in, garbage out. And no one knows how accurate they're going to do name handwriting. This is a classic example from 1910 Census, Pennsylvania. The company, the pay company, outsourced the transcription. So this person, the idea is it might have been done in China. This person started to transcribe this, got down to the last Donato, and couldn't quite figure out the name. So guess what appears on the index for the last person? Watch not Teneget Donato appears on the index. Well, I expect to see a lot of Watch Not Tenegets actually on April 1st. And of course, they could not read Not Christened Yet. They probably didn't even understand what that meant in terms of it. There are poor and illegible census copies. The 1950 forms were microfilmed in 1952, and they were destroyed in 1961 to 63. We can't go back and look at them. 4%, 1 out of 25 or so people were not counted in 1950. So by locational tools, you can see that that house was missed because the enumerator goes on a route. So it will document a missed residence. If a lot of people want to find out who lived in this house in 1950, well, they don't know the name. And then what are you going to do for a common name like John Smith? Let's say John Smith in Philadelphia. Is that all they're going to give you? You're going to look up John Smith, Philadelphia, and expect to get to their enumeration district on the preliminary name. These are all the John Smiths in the telephone directory in Philadelphia. And telephone directories are going to be a source for finding addresses, along with what are called city directories. Let's look at maps. The Census Bureau already has a talk on maps. No, it's not Census Bureau, it's the National Archives. A very nice overview, but I'm an expert on enumeration district maps, and I have a YouTube video on this. This person did not look at my video. And she didn't look at the paper I wrote also that we have up on the One Step website. And this is when you realize that sometimes maps aren't reality. The National Archives put 9,600 ED maps on their catalog. Those are available now. It includes county maps and maps of cities with 5 or more EDs. If you want a free map from 1950 for a city, it might be available to you on the National Archive website. You can go to the catalog, National Archives catalog.archives.gov, and get the maps. And this new website on April 1st will also have a link. I'll tell you that the One Step has also a link. We'll talk about that. And remember, there is another major resource for finding ED numbers by location, and it's something called the Steve Morse One Step website. I've worked with Steve for over 2 decades. It's at stevemorse.org, not .com. .com is a professional musician. You will want the unified tool on the U.S. Census section for census research. I'm going to go over this a couple of times. I want you to bookmark it. You're going to be using it. Steve is on the left. Dave Case is in the middle. Dave died in a rafting accident in Utah 2 years ago, and I'm on the right. And in 2001, we got together and created in 2 weeks, basically the locational subtool within the One Step site. One Step site is known for its Ellis Island material, has over 300 utilities. And those of you who don't know Steve, you should, because the computer you're using right now owes directly to Steve, Steve is the designer of the Intel 8086 microprocessor, which sparked the PC revolution many years ago. He has a PhD in electrical engineering and still enjoys tinkering with electronics. His Ellis Island search engine is well known. He wrote the book on the 8086, 8088 computer chip. And a lot of people have used our website. So when the 1940 census came online, his website in 2012 was getting about 135,000 hits a day. And then when the census became public, we got 2.25 million hits that day it became public as people migrated to our website. And in addition to that, we had helped the National Archives 1940 website and 2 others with our databases. And it slowed down, but we don't have graphics there. We're a little concerned on when the 1950 comes out. We're going to do this a couple of times. This is the unified tool. We trust you we trust you to make mistakes. So in order to avoid that, we don't give you an opportunity to type in anything except in 2 places. Everything is going to be a pull down list. Underneath 1950, which is the standard right now, is 1940, 1930. We have this for a number of census years. We come over here and we choose California from the list of states. And we choose orange. As soon as we choose orange, out pops up, hey, you can see the ED maps for Orange County. You don't have to go to the National Archive catalog. You click on that and automatically you go to, this is a unified tool, you go outside to another utility, which is our ED district maps. And there are all the maps there and you can click on them and get the JPEGs for the maps. You could also get to many 1950 maps that are either missing, hiding, misnamed, or mislinked at the National Archives catalog, because I went through every single one, basically, of those maps. I know where they are, the 9,600 maps. And I know that 5 maps aren't there. We made our own maps and put them on the One Step website. So if you try to find ED maps for these large cities, they're not there on the catalog. I'm going to demonstrate to you how to use the one-step tools for urban and rural location searches. The rural and small urban areas is based upon the searches on the ED definitions. Now, the National Archive did this as well. There are 38 rolls of film that describe the 230,000 enumeration districts. The National Archive also has the original documents. I don't know whether they used them or not. They digitized the images. I was hoping they would be seen by now. They're not. They're going to release them on April 1st. In the meantime, they OCR'd the images. They did all the words. ED definition column. On April 1st, 2022, it'll be available. I don't think it's searchable by names within the ED definition, just the number. On the other hand, what I did was I found out where those 38 rolls of film were by using the internet. I got all the films by Interlibrary alone from Cal State. I hand digitized them. We put the images online in 2013. I had 30 volunteers transcribe the 230,000 EDs. It's not word for word. It's relevant information plus words for clarity. And we put those online in 2014, and they're fully searchable. Every single word in that definition is searchable. Now, why did I put this on? Why do you think, Mark, I put this on? Well, it turns out that, believe it or not, 28 rolls of this is at Caltech. Why they have ED definition rolls at Caltech, I have no idea. In fact, they're trying to get rid of them. But I made an agreement with the librarian there to give me 6 rolls at a time. And with a simple point and shoot camera, which you can buy for $30 today on eBay, and a macro lens, I was able to digitize a roll of film in 2 to 3 hours. And so 30,000 images later, and by the way, you notice that I'm photographing 2 pages for each photograph. 30,000 images later, I had digitized all the film, and then we put it online so that our volunteers could work. Once I had them online, volunteers all throughout the United States and the world could help us. I went back, and since they dropped from 1940 to 1950, rule names, I added about 80,000 rule names from 4,700 county maps. I went through that. And then what we did, and this the National Archive will not have, and they will not have this, is not only did we do the ED definitions, which are boundary definitions, but we also included all the internal street names in 2,500 cities. So you can search, well, I'll show you what you can do. So let's find the ED number for Costa Mesa, Orange County, California, 1950. Has 11,847 people. Doesn't have its own map. Have to go to the county map. County map is terrible for Orange County. These maps could be from 1930. Remember, the Census Bureau gets the maps wherever they can and then draws stuff on them. Enumeration districts are in orange. We don't know what individual ones are. How many EDs cover Costa Mesa in 1950? Anybody? How many EDs cover Costa Mesa in 1950?
3.
Mark says 3. Thank you, Mark. I'm sorry, that's not correct. There are actually 5 that cover it. You did see 3, but there are 5 that cover it. Remember, I told you the maps aren't reality. And to make it worse, one of the original numbers is incomplete, it's invalid, and I'll show you why. I have a YouTube video on this. So let's do this by the one-step tool. The one-step tool has 2 databases, and the databases are hiding behind these boxes here that won't allow you to get in there until you do something before. The ED definitions are hiding inside this box. The street indexes are hiding behind this box. So you come here, you choose California. I don't even have to choose county. You come here for the city or town. Costa Mesa is not here, doesn't have 5 EDs. But there's an other specify. And when you choose other specify, this box opens up and you can type in Costa Mesa. As soon as you type in Costa Mesa, we look for anywhere where it appears on the ED definitions. And voila, as soon as you do that, you get 6 EDs that have Costa Mesa as part of the definition. You can then do a bunch of things, but I can press more details. And here are our transcriptions. And now you see that one of the original EDs has been split. Now, the reason is that when the Census Bureau decided to make that an ED, they misjudged how many people were in it. Or the other possibility is that there was a institution that required its own ED. So a supervisor, after the maps were made, said, no, we're going to split it. And the splits usually do not show on the map. People are going to be caught on that. So by looking at this, these are boundary definitions on the north, east, south, and west side. You should be able to figure out where your area is in Costa Mesa, where the ED is. This one is outside of Newport Beach City and Costa Mesa. That's the reason why that's here. There's 6 here. Because of that, I can put in any keyword I want here. I can put jail in California and find all the EDs that have jail in the definition, or prison, all the EDs. Very powerful tool. And let me go back. In addition to that, remember, I have 80,000 additional words here because I added the unincorporated communities. Let's look at a bigger community like San Francisco. So I have street indexes for 2,400 urban areas, transcribed from ED maps, ED boundary definitions, and all the street names, most of the institutions, parks, cemeteries. Let's look at a large city. This is the northern part of San Francisco. This is the map. Let's assume I have a residence here where the star is. What is A-1? Anybody know what A-1 is? Well, it's actually it's a steak sauce. But other than that, it's actually a census tract number, which remember that the housing pamphlet used census tract numbers. What is the ED number that the star is in? Curtis, what's the ED number the star is in?
Well, I see a 3 and a 2 and an
Yes.
8 and 9.
Is that your answer?
Well,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Curtis. I am sorry. I'm so sorry. That 3 is not the ED number. And I warned you. I said I was going to quiz you. Remember when I said I was going to quiz you? I said that ED numbers are 2-part numbers. For large cities, they did not put the prefix on large city maps. Instead, what you have to do, and you have to be told this, and a lot of people are going to make this mistake if they use maps, is you got to look at the legend. And the legend says all ED numbers preceded by 38. That's a 38-3 number. Here is the Bay Area. These are the maps. You can see San Jose, the large cities, no prefix. You go to San Mateo, Albany, my daughter's in Albany, Concord, the prefix is on the map. Let's find the ED number for 445 Wheeler Avenue in San Francisco for the 1950 census. I chose this for a number of reasons. It's on here. Now, I don't care. We don't use the 445 number. We use it to find the block. It's a block strategy. And the block that this residence is on is Wheeler Avenue, Lathrop on the north, Peninsular on the east, and city limits on the south. It's 38210, you know that now. It's also split. You didn't know, you probably wouldn't know that to begin with. The one-step unified tool is not going to make that error. So let's do it. I choose California. Don't worry about county. I choose San Francisco. Up pops the ED maps, and up pops all the enumeration districts within San Francisco. I don't want to look through all of them. But it also opens up this box. So if I do a city, it opens up my street index box. You can see Steve does the programming and I am responsible for the databases. He's an excellent programmer. In this box are all the streets in San Francisco. Where did I get them from? From the transcriptions we did. So I put in Wheeler. I don't type it in, I pick it. And as soon as I pick Wheeler, we reduce the number of EDs to 3, because those are the only 3 EDs that have Wheeler on our street index. So I can put the house number here and do a Google search, take me a Google map to figure out all the other streets on the city block. Now I look in here, there aren't as many streets because these streets are only from these 3 enumeration districts. So I put down Lathrop. I choose Lathrop. I'm down to 2. I choose city limits. I'm down to 1. It's the split ED with the prefix. And now what I can do, and the archives website will be able to do this as well, is this is a link. I can go to the first page of the ED number once it's available. I can go to our ED transcription. I can go to the original microfilm, and I can see the actual streets in the ED. And this is the reason why that looking at ED definitions, which are here, there are a lot more street names inside and on the boundary than you have with the ED definition. That's why the ED street index is such a powerful tool. Okay, concluding remarks. Hey, that's not bad. 2 minutes to 2. The last talk I gave a couple of days ago, I gave it to Oregon. It's all on Zoom. In fact, a couple of days I'm giving a talk to a Maryland group. I removed 22 slides because I added so many I couldn't do it. Well, Emeriti of Cal State Fullerton and the rest of you in the system, and how many people are here? It's only 16. That's too bad. In Oregon yesterday or a couple of days ago, I had over 100 people who showed up for this talk. Well, I know what you're thinking about. How are we going to remember all this stuff? How are we going to remember all this stuff? And I'm not going to answer that phone. My wife will. Well, let's review. You have a handout. You know that you need to find addresses from 1950. You know there's Steve Morse and the One Step website filled with interesting things, including this, which I'll tell you about. You know there's myself, who has JDW Talks. You know that the National Archive have ED maps, and they're going to have a preliminary name index. You know that there's going to be a major effort to update the name index and the Ancestry's OCR AI ML. You have your folder, and you have all sorts of things. You have this YouTube talk, Learning to Use 1950 Census Locational Tools with Help of an Interactive Tutorial. And so the first question is, we ask you, do you know the city, town, rural area, institution which your family lived in April 1st, 1950, the official day a little bit of information, a little bit of questions. Yes, I know, takes you to each of these subdivisions. No, I don't. It takes you to look up these various ways of doing it. So we hope, myself, my volunteers, and Steve Morse, we hope you find your 1950 people. We hope that the enumerator visited your house, that the residents participated. Joe, just a second. Hey, that kid, that's Michael. I had a cap just like his when I was 8 years old in 1950. I had a cap just like his. I can picture myself being there when the enumerator came. In fact, I can picture 9.5-year-old Steve Morse right behind me. This is going to be the first time that either of us is going, and we've been working on census work for over 20 years. So when I say good luck, I mean good luck to all of us who are going to be on the 1950 census searches.